It had been a long time since anyone had heard from humanity. Years had passed, and the once mighty human armada was believed to be lost forever. The galaxy had moved on, and the myths of human conquest had faded into distant history. But deep within the heart of the galaxy, something unexpected was happening. A strange signal, ancient and unfamiliar, began to echo across the stars. It was faint, like a whisper in the vastness of space, but it was unmistakable. The signal was from humanity. At first, the aliens thought it was just a malfunction, perhaps. Some old piece of technology was finally picking up dust and sending out random data. But as the signal persisted, it became impossible to ignore. It was not random, it was deliberate. It was a message. The signal was weak, fractured, and carried through deep space. But the message was clear enough. Humanity was returning. Far across the galaxy, the alien races were alerted to the strange signal. No one could understand it fully, but everyone could feel its weight. For centuries, humanity had been believed to be a thing of the past, a lost race that had vanished after a terrible war. The galaxy had flourished in their absence, and the peaceful alien factions had grown comfortable, even arrogant. Yet now, the signal was a reminder that the humans were not gone. They had survived, and they were coming back. In the central command of the Draxians, the most powerful and advanced of all the alien species, the council gathered to discuss the message. They had always believed humanity to be a myth, a tale of ancient warriors whose armies had been wiped out long ago. The very thought that humanity might still exist was unthinkable. Yet, the signal was there, undeniable, growing stronger with each passing day. What does it mean? Asked Chief Strategist Walter, a tall, imposing figure who had never been known to show fear. But even his usually composed face was troubled as he looked over the data. It means that humanity has survived, replied the commander, Orlon, his voice low and grave. And they are coming back. I believe they are returning to the galaxy, to our galaxy. The council fell silent. It was impossible to grasp. If humanity was truly returning, what did that mean for the rest of the galaxy? The Draxians had long held the power, maintaining peace through strength, but they had never encountered a force like humanity. Not in their prime, and certainly not now. Far from the Draxian command, another species, the Zorvans, also picked up the signal. The Zorvans were not a warlike people. They preferred peace, knowledge, and understanding. However, when they deciphered the signal, their reaction was not one of curiosity or wonder, it was fear. The Zorvans had witnessed humanity's rise and fall in their early history, and they remembered the terror the human fleets once brought with them. The thought of a return was not a hopeful one. They remembered the tales passed down through generations, how the humans had nearly destroyed everything in their path, leaving only chaos in their wake. We cannot be caught unprepared, the Zorvan leader, Lyra, said with urgency. We must build our defenses. We cannot risk being caught off guard by a race that has the power to destroy everything we have built. The entire council agreed. The Zorvans, known for their technological prowess, began activating old warships that had been decommissioned for centuries. The fleet, once hidden in the depths of Zorvan space, now began to stir with life. The peaceful species was preparing for war. As the days turned to weeks, the signal grew stronger. It was no longer a weak whisper. It had become a steady hum, reaching every corner of the galaxy. Some alien races, once unconcerned about humanity's existence, now found themselves scrambling for information. They knew little of what the humans might be capable of now, but they knew they had been powerful once. They had been the dominant force in the galaxy. And that power had not disappeared. Far from the alien councils and their growing unease, a small hidden outpost on the edge of the galaxy received the first full transmission. The message was long, a mix of coordinates and instructions, but the most important part was simple. Humanity was not only alive, they had found a way to survive. and they were coming to claim their place in the galaxy once more. The humans had been scattered, hidden, in forgotten corners of the universe. Their fleets had been lost in time, their colonies abandoned. But they had always been resilient. Now, with the dying star at the center of their path, they were coming back. Humanity was returning to the galaxy that had once been theirs. And they were not coming in peace. The alien factions were beginning to realize this. They understood now that the return of humanity was not some chance occurrence. It was a calculated move. The humans had been silent for far too long, and now they were coming, bringing with them their old power and their anger. The galaxy had forgotten them, and now they would remind it of what they were capable of. But the question remained, why had they waited so long? What had happened to the human armada, and why were they returning now at the very moment when the galaxy seemed to be flourishing without them? The answers were still far away, hidden in the deep, cold silence of space. But one thing was certain: the galaxy was about to change. The human armada was not just a relic of the past. It was a force of nature, returning to claim what it had lost. The first part of the signal, the first call from the humans, had been received. Now it was only a matter of time before the galaxy would face the full force of what humanity had become. And no one knew if the galaxy would be ready for what was about to come. As the alien factions made their preparations, one truth stood clear in their minds: humanity had always been a force to be reckoned with. And now, the galaxy would once again feel their power. The galaxy had never experienced a moment quite like this. After centuries of peace and relative stability, an ancient fear began to stir again, echoing through the stars. The human armada, once a terrifying myth, was no longer just a signal. It was real. And it was coming closer, on the edge of the galaxy, in a small, quiet star system. The first of the aliens caught sight of the fleet. It was a fleeting glimpse, a shimmer in the darkness, but it was enough. The dread and the tension that had been building among the various species for weeks suddenly erupted. The Armada was not some far-off threat, not just a whisper in the dark. It was here, moving towards them with purpose and power, across the vast expanse of space. The Zorvans had been the first to track the human fleet's movements. Using their advanced technology, they had pinpointed the human ships in a distant corner of the galaxy, just outside the reach of their current defense systems. For a time, the Zorvans had been able to maintain the illusion of calm, their scientists working tirelessly to understand the size, nature, and intentions of the humans. But now, as the human fleet loomed closer, that calm shattered. Lyra, the Zorvan leader, stood in her command center, her eyes locked on the vast holographic display. The human ships had not yet arrived in full force, but the message they carried was already clear. They were not here to negotiate. The Zorvans had always been a race of intellect, valuing wisdom over war, diplomacy over destruction. But even they could not ignore the growing threat before them. The moment had arrived, and there was no turning back. "Prepare the fleet," Lyra ordered, her voice steady but filled with an edge of concern. "We must know their numbers and their capabilities. We cannot afford to be unprepared." The Zorvan fleet, once dormant, began to stir. Ships that had not seen battle in centuries powered up, their engines humming with the promise of destruction. There were thousands of them, sleek, fast, and equipped with technology that had been developed long before the humans had vanished. But there was something about the approaching human fleet that unsettled even the most battle-hardened Zorvan generals. The ships were old, ancient even, yet they seemed to move with a sense of purpose that no one could predict. And then, there it was, a massive ship, unlike anything the Zorvans had ever seen, emerged from the darkness of space. The human flagship, larger than any known vessel, loomed before them like an iron giant, its hull a testament to the power and craftsmanship of a forgotten era. The ship was a relic, yet it looked as if it could wipe out entire fleets with a single blast. It was silent, its weapons dormant for now, but the mere sight of it was enough to send waves of fear through the alien command center. Lyra's gaze hardened as she stared at the ship on the screen. It was clear now the humans had not come to seek peace. They were back to reclaim their place in the galaxy, and they would not stop until they had what they wanted. "Get me the fleet's commander," Lyra snapped, her mind racing as she formulated a strategy. They had to act quickly, or they would lose their advantage. Meanwhile, across the galaxy, the Draxians, who had long been considered the dominant force, were also reacting to the first sighting of the human fleet. In their war rooms, high-ranking officials gathered around a massive holographic table, watching as the human ships advanced. The Draxians had never expected this. They had believed the galaxy was theirs to rule, that no force could challenge their might. But as the human fleet slowly edged into their territory, all of their assumptions began to crumble. "How many are there?" Walter demanded, his sharp eyes scanning the incoming data. "Thousands," the technician replied, her voice trembling. "But they are not what we expected. The ships, some of them are relics, centuries old, yet they are far more advanced than any of our technology." The Draxian leaders exchanged uneasy glances. The humans had always been known for their ingenuity, for their ability to innovate under pressure, but this was something different. The Armada they saw before them was not just a collection of warships. It was a symbol of resilience, a force born from necessity. These ships had been built to survive, to adapt, and to fight. The Draxians understood this better than anyone. They had survived their own wars, their own near extinction. But they had never faced an enemy like this. "We must act now," Commander Orlan said, his voice low and commanding. "If we allow them to gain any ground, they will have the upper hand. We cannot afford to wait." Walter nodded, his mind already formulating a plan. "Prepare the fleet for engagement. We'll meet them in open space. Let them know we are not afraid." But the Draxians were not the only ones watching. A third faction, the Targoth, a race of warriors known for their brutal nature, had also caught wind of the human fleet's arrival. The Targoth had always thrived in chaos, feeding off the fear and destruction that war brought. To them, the return of the humans was a call to arms, a chance to prove their superiority over the galaxies. Other inhabitants. "Let them come," grinned their leader Kosh, a hulking figure with scars covering his face from countless battles. "Let them see what real warriors are capable of." His generals, bloodthirsty and eager, shared his enthusiasm. They could sense the bloodshed that awaited them. The Targoth had never backed down from a fight, and the return of the humans was not something they would allow to pass without a challenge. As the human fleet approached the star at the center of the galaxy, the alien factions continued to prepare. The Zorvans, the Draxians, and the Targoth all were ready to face the incoming threat. But the humans had one advantage they could not foresee: the will to survive. The human ships, weathered by time and war, moved with a quiet purpose. Did not need to announce their presence with grand gestures. They let their actions speak louder than any words ever could. Each ship was a testament to the unbreakable spirit of humanity. Despite their ships being old, each vessel contained advanced systems, new technologies hidden deep within the ship structure, waiting for the right moment to be unleashed. At the heart of the fleet, on board the flagship, Captain Drayton stood before the control panel, his face hard with resolve. He had seen the galaxy fall apart once before. He had seen the rise of alien empires that had forgotten the human strength. But now humanity was back. They would not be ignored. They would not fade into the background again. They had come to reclaim their place. "Prepare the fleet," Drayton ordered, his voice steady but filled with urgency. "We will show them the strength of humanity. We will show them that we are not here to be pushed aside. We are here to take back what is ours." The final pieces of the puzzle were falling into place. The human fleet was nearing the star. The alien factions, who had long believed themselves to be the rulers of the galaxy, were preparing to face the greatest challenge of their lives. They had no idea what the humans were capable of, but they would soon find out. The time for waiting was over. The time for action had come. As the first shots rang out across the void, the galaxy trembled. It was no longer just a signal. The human armada had returned, and the galaxy would never be the same again. The distant star, now the focal point of the galaxy, had begun its inevitable death spiral. It was an old star, one that had given life to countless worlds, but now its energy was fading. In its final stages, it became a dangerous and unpredictable force. The humans, however, were not afraid. They had come for it, and they knew that its death would serve their purpose. But no one knew what that purpose truly was, not even the human fleet commanders. The galaxy's factions, on the other hand, were bracing for what was to come. The Zorvans, the Draxians, and the Targoth all had their own strategies in place. But one thing was clear: no one knew what the humans had planned. And the longer they waited, the more it became clear that they were not prepared for the scale of what was about to happen. The first moves came from the Zorvans. They had decided to take the cautious approach, trying to use their advanced technology to monitor the human fleet from a distance. Their sensors were sophisticated, capable of detecting even the smallest movements in space. But what they found only deepened the mystery. The human fleet was vast, but it was not just its size that troubled the Zorvans. It was the quiet, deliberate way it moved through the stars, as if the fleet knew exactly where it was going. The Zorvans could not predict the human fleet's next move, and that uncertainty made them uneasy. Commander Lyra stood in the command center of the Zorvan flagship, her eyes glued to the holographic display in front of her. The human fleet was now just a few light years away, moving at an impressive speed, but always keeping its distance from the dying star. Why are they staying so far away? Lyra wondered aloud, her voice tinged with frustration. They're not going to make any moves, not yet. Her second-in-command, Tylo, looked at the screen, his brow furrowed in confusion. They're not acting like we thought they would. No immediate signs of aggression, but they're clearly waiting for something. Lyra paced the command center, her mind racing. The silence from the human fleet was unsettling. For the first time in a long time, she felt as if they were the ones being hunted. It wasn't the threat of war that concerned her. It was the fact that humanity's intentions were so unknown. We cannot afford to sit back and wait any longer, Lyra said, her tone firm. Prepare our fleet for a defensive stance. We'll keep our distance, but we need to be ready. Meanwhile, on the Draxian warship, Commander Orlan was dealing with his own set of problems. The Draxians had always prided themselves on their might, but even they could not ignore the growing sense of dread that had taken hold. They had never faced an enemy like this. Despite their technological superiority, the human fleet felt like an unstoppable force. The Draxians had sent out probes to gather information, but the results were always the same. Humanity was keeping its distance, watching, waiting. Orlan gathered his top officers around the war table, the holographic images of the fleet displayed before them. We cannot afford to underestimate them. We've seen what they're capable of, Orlan said, his voice filled with determination. The humans may not be attacking yet, but they are preparing for something. We need to figure out what that is, and fast. His chief strategist, Valter, nodded. We've been running simulations, but the human fleet's tactics don't match any of our previous encounters. They seem to be conserving energy, holding back. Why? I don't know, Orlan replied, his mind troubled. But I do know that we need to strike first. We can't let them gain an advantage. We'll attack at their weakest point. Which is where? Valter asked, raising an eyebrow. Orlan hesitated. We don't know yet. We have to force them into a position where they'll have no choice but to respond. Then we'll see how they fight. Elsewhere in the galaxy, The Targoth had their own approach to the situation. The Targoth were not a race known for subtlety. They were brutal, war-driven creatures who believed in strength above all else. For them, the human fleet was a challenge, and they were eager to meet it head-on. Kosh, the Targoth warlord, was not known for his patience. He wanted battle, and he wanted it now. "They've been waiting long enough," Kosh growled, slamming his fist onto the command table. "It's time to show them what we're made of. We're not afraid of them. Let's give them a taste of Targoth strength." His generals exchanged uncertain looks. "Are you sure we should attack them now, Commander?" One asked. "The Draxians are already preparing for a strike. Shouldn't we wait for a clear sign of weakness?" Kosh snarled. "Weakness? The human fleet is waiting for us to show fear. If we attack now, we show them who rules the galaxy. Let them know we are the Targoth." The Targoth warlord's words were filled with fiery conviction, and though some of his generals were hesitant, they knew better than to argue with him. The Targoth would go to war, whether the galaxy was ready or not. As the various alien factions prepared for their respective actions, the human fleet continued its silent march toward the dying star. The countdown had already begun. The closer the fleet got, the more tension built across the galaxy. The dying star loomed like an ominous clock, ticking down to an unknown fate. The humans knew what they were doing. They had been preparing for this moment for years. But to the galaxy, the human fleet was an enigma. They had no idea what the humans wanted, and that uncertainty gnawed at their minds. Captain Drayton stood on the bridge of the human flagship, his gaze focused on the vast expanse of space ahead. The star was within reach now, its light fading and flickering in the distance. He could feel the anticipation in the air. The galaxy had forgotten the power of humanity, but they would soon remember. "Status report," Drayton said, his voice steady but filled with purpose. "We're nearing the star, Captain," came the reply from the tactical officer. "The fleet is in position. All systems are running smoothly. We're ready to engage at your command." Drayton nodded. "Not yet, we wait. We let the galaxy come to us." The humans were waiting, and the waiting game was proving to be far more unnerving than anyone expected. The tension was palpable, and the alien factions felt the heat building as they prepared to make their move. Then, just as the human fleet was about to cross the final threshold into the system of the dying star, the first shots were fired. It wasn't from the humans. It wasn't from the Draxians or the Targoth. It came from the Zorvans. They had taken the first step. The Zorvans, with their advanced technology, launched a series of laser beams toward the human ships. The attack was sudden, calculated, and precise. The lasers streaked across space, cutting through the void toward the human fleet. The humans had known the attack was coming, but they had allowed it to happen. The lasers made contact, striking the shields of the human ships. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the human fleet's shields shimmered and absorbed the impact. The alien attack had done nothing to slow the fleet down. The Zorvans watched in disbelief. Their most powerful weapons had barely made a dent. It was clear now that the humans were ready for whatever the galaxy could throw at them. "Launch countermeasures," Drayton ordered calmly. "Let's show them what we've got." With a flick of his hand, the human fleet unleashed a barrage of counterattacks. The Zorvans had just made a critical mistake. They had provoked the humans. Now the countdown to battle had truly begun. The shockwaves of the initial attack reverberated across the galaxy. The Zorvans had underestimated humanity, and now they were paying the price. The human fleet, despite its ancient and weathered appearance, had demonstrated an undeniable power that no one had expected. The galaxy's dominant races, the Draxians, the Targoth, and the Zorvans, were now on edge. What had once been a quiet, almost forgotten myth was now very real, and they had no choice but to confront it. But even as the battle lines were being drawn and the tension reached its peak, One question lingered in the minds of the alien leaders. Why were the humans returning now? What had caused them to emerge from the void after centuries of silence? The humans had not yet revealed their intentions, and their silence only deepened the mystery. They had attacked when provoked, but they had not sought to destroy. They had not come for domination, at least not yet. No, the humans were not acting like conquerors. There was something deeper, more urgent, about their return. On the flagship of the human fleet, Captain Drayden stood before the massive holographic map of the galaxy. His mind was sharp, calculating, but even he did not have all the answers. He knew why they were here, why the Armada had returned, but the others did not. Not yet. The rest of the galaxy had no idea what the true purpose of their mission was. As he stared at the map, the dying star at the center of their path pulsed. Faintly, its light growing dimmer with every passing moment. Humanity had been watching it for years, studying its behavior, its energy output. They knew that the star's collapse was inevitable, but they also knew that the galaxy was unprepared for the chaos that would follow. The star's death would not only destroy its surrounding planets, but also trigger a chain reaction that would send shockwaves through the galaxy's fragile balance. Drayden clenched his fists. The galaxy doesn't even know what's coming. The first signs of the star's instability had been detected long ago by the humans. They had not been able to stop it, but they had learned to harness its power. The star was the key to everything. The key to their survival. For centuries, humanity had been scattered, isolated on distant planets, forgotten by the rest of the galaxy. The wars that had destroyed their empire had left them fractured, and the technological marvels that had once made them the most powerful race in the galaxy were lost. But they had survived. And now they were coming back not to conquer, but to save themselves. "Captain," came the voice of his second-in-command, Lieutenant Cora, "the Zorvans are retreating. They've withdrawn their attack fleet. But the Draxians and Targoth are still mobilizing." Drayden's gaze never wavered from the map. "Let them come," he said, his voice calm but filled with a deep sense of resolve. "They'll find that we're not here to fight them. We're here for something much bigger." Cora raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean, sir?" Drayden turned to face her, his expression hard. "The star is dying. It's been dying for years, but no one has noticed. Everyone has been too focused on their petty wars, their control of this galaxy, but they don't realize the real threat. It's not the humans they need to worry about, it's the star." "Are you saying the star is the real threat?" Cora asked, her voice filled with disbelief. "How could it be a threat?" Drayden's eyes darkened. "The star's collapse is going to tear this galaxy apart. Its death will send out a shockwave, destabilizing everything in its path. The entire system will collapse, taking with it the balance of power in the galaxy. And the worst part is, the galaxy doesn't even know it's coming. We do. We've known for years." Cora stared at him, her mind racing to understand. "But why didn't we stop it? Why didn't we warn the galaxy?" Drayden's expression softened, but there was a bitter edge to his voice. "We tried. We fought. But no one listened. They thought we were defeated, a myth. The galaxy moved on. And when the star began to die, we had to make a choice. We couldn't save it. We could only survive." Cora's eyes widened as the weight of his words hit her. "So you're saying we're not here to conquer the galaxy? We're not here for revenge? We're here to survive?" "Exactly," Drayden said, "and the galaxy has no idea. They think we're coming to reclaim our throne, to battle them for control. But they're wrong. We've come to warn them, to show them what's coming. And if they don't listen, they'll be destroyed along with us." Cora's mind spun. She had always known that the human fleet was powerful, but the truth was far greater than anything she had imagined. The humans were not here for war. They were here because the galaxy's future, its very survival, was at stake. Meanwhile, across the galaxy, The Zorvans were struggling to comprehend what they had just learned. Their initial assessment of the human fleet had been wrong. They had believed the humans were returning to conquer, to reclaim their old empire. But the truth was far more complex. The Zorvans had made their retreat after the humans' counterattack had proven too much for them. But now they were left to wonder, what is it that the humans want? Lyra sat in her command center, staring at the reports pouring in from her fleet. The data was inconsistent, confusing. The humans had not fought to destroy. They had fought to defend themselves. They had not acted like invaders, but like survivors. She had read Drayden's transmission over and over, trying to understand the implications. The star is dying, she muttered to herself. They're not here for power, they're here to survive. But why didn't they say this sooner? Why the secrecy? Lyra's thoughts were interrupted by a transmission from the Draxian command. It was Commander Orlan. "We need to talk," Orlan said, his tone terse. "The situation has changed. We were preparing to engage, but now I'm not sure that's the right course of action. The humans aren't here for war, they're here for something else. We need to find out what it is before we act." Lyra hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "I agree. We've been fighting the wrong enemy all along. If the humans are telling the truth, then we are all in grave danger." Across the galaxy, the Draxians, the Zorvans, and even the Targoth began to reconsider their approach. The humans were not the threat they had believed them to be. They were not here to destroy. They were here to warn, but the question remained. Would the galaxy listen in time? As the human fleet continued its slow march toward the dying star, the truth about their mission began to spread, but it was already too late. The countdown to disaster was ticking. And no one, not even the humans, knew just how much time they had left. Drayden stood on the bridge of the flagship, watching the final countdown clock ticking down. The star was getting closer. The galaxy was getting closer to the edge of its existence. The fate of all the races in the galaxy now rested on one question. Would they unite to face the impending doom? Or would they fall to their own fears and ignorance? Drayden closed his eyes, feeling the weight of the decision before him. It was no longer just about humanity's survival. It was about the survival of everyone. The galaxy had a choice to make, and Drayden knew that time was running out. The revelation had been made, but the final reckoning was yet to come. The universe had always been a place of conflict. It was where empires rose and fell, where peace was a fleeting moment, and where the thirst for power never truly died. But now, with the human fleet's return and the dying stars impending collapse, the galaxy faced something far more terrifying than a battle for control. This was no longer about who would rule. This was about survival, pure and simple. The galaxy's factions had been caught off guard. They had expected the humans to return with the same arrogance that had once defined their empire. Instead, the humans had arrived with a quiet, dangerous resolve. They were not here to reclaim a throne. They were here to prevent their extinction. And if the rest of the galaxy did not wake up to that truth, they too would perish in the firestorm that the dying star would unleash. The alien fleets, once confident in their superiority, were now struggling to keep pace with the urgency of the situation. The Zorvans, the Draxians, and the Targoth had all mobilized, each faction preparing for the possibility of a war with the humans. But it was clear that no one was ready for what was to come. The dying star was growing more unstable by the hour, and the galaxy was racing against time. Captain Drayden stood at the center of the human flagship's command deck, his expression grim. His thoughts had long since turned away from the looming battle with the alien fleets. The real war was not one they could win with weapons. The real war was against time itself. "Captain, we are approaching the star's outer perimeter," Lieutenant Cora reported, her voice calm but tinged with an edge of concern. "We'll have to make a decision soon. The shockwave from the star's collapse will reach us in less than 3 days. The galaxy has no idea what's coming. Drayden's hands clenched on the console. The time for warnings is over, he said quietly. We've tried to tell them. They wouldn't listen. Now we'll have to force them to act. We'll show them the cost of their inaction. Should we prepare for full engagement? Cora asked, looking at him closely. Drayden hesitated. The decision weighed heavily on him. Humanity had never been a race that relished war, but it had always been a race capable of waging it. But this wasn't about dominating the galaxy, it was about survival. The galaxy had two choices. They could join humanity and fight to survive the coming cataclysm, or they could continue their petty conflicts and be wiped out along with the dying star. We can't wait any longer, Drayden said, his voice hardening. Prepare the fleet for action. We will make our move, and they will have to decide if they want to survive. As the human fleet moved into position near the collapsing star, tension was palpable across the galaxy. The Zorvans, the Draxians, and the Targoth all knew that the battle was inevitable. But none of them had expected it to unfold this way. The humans had not acted as invaders, they had not attacked outright. But now, with the final stages of the star's collapse imminent, the galaxy had no choice but to respond. The Draxian fleet, led by Commander Orlan, was the first to engage. The Draxians were known for their superior firepower, their sleek and deadly warships designed for maximum destruction. Orlan had decided that the humans needed to be put in their place before they became an even greater threat. He knew that. The time to negotiate had passed. If the humans were not willing to join forces, then they would have to be defeated. We cannot afford to be weak, Orlan muttered to his officers. Engage the humans. Show them that Draxians will not be cowed. The Draxian fleet powered toward the human ships with terrifying speed. The sleek, shining vessels cut through space like knives, their weapons primed and ready to strike. But as they closed in on the human fleet, something unexpected happened. The humans did not panic. They did not retreat. Instead, they opened fire. The battle had begun. The first wave of Draxian ships launched volleys of energy blasts toward the human fleet. The explosions lit up the darkness of space, the soundless battle raging across the stars. But humanity's counterattack was quick and precise. Their ships, though older, were built with a resilience and adaptability that had long been underestimated. The Draxian ships were powerful, but they lacked the same improvisational strength that humanity brought to the fight. We're not going to beat them with strength alone, Drayden muttered to himself as he watched the battle unfold on his screen. We have to outsmart them. The human ships, though not as sleek or fast as the Draxian fleet, were equipped with adaptive shields and advanced weaponry that allowed them to deflect the Draxian blasts. Each shot from the Draxians was met with a calculated response from the humans. They were not just defending, they were taking control of the situation. On the bridge of the flagship, Cora turned to Drayden. They're not giving up. The Draxians will press harder. We know that, Drayden said, his tone unwavering. We have to force them into a position where they can't fight back. Keep the pressure on. Don't give them any room to breathe. As the battle raged on, the Zorvans watched from the sidelines, unsure of what to do. They had long been known for their diplomacy, their preference for peace. But now, faced with the reality of humanity's return and the growing threat of the star's collapse, they knew they had no choice but to act. Lyra, the Zorvan leader, stood in her command center, watching the battle unfold on her holographic screen. Her face was set with determination. We have waited too long, she said, her voice steady. We cannot let the Draxians take control of this situation. Prepare our fleet. We will enter the fight. Her officers hesitated. Are you sure, Commander? The humans are not acting like we thought. They are not here for conquest, they are here for survival. Lyra's eyes narrowed. I know what they're here for. But the galaxy has no time to wait for them to explain. We'll do what's necessary. We will join the fight. With that, The Zorvan fleet powered up, their ships sleek and fast, capable of navigating the complex terrain of the galaxy with precision. They entered the fray, the energy shields of their ships glowing brightly as they engaged the Draxians. The Zorvans had long been a neutral force, preferring to remain apart from conflicts. But now they too had been drawn into the battle, not for control, but for survival. At the same time, the Targoth, led by their brutal warlord Kash, had been itching for a fight. They had waited for the moment when they could plunge into the fray, their thirst for blood driving them forward. Their ships were heavy, designed for close combat, and their weaponry was designed to tear through enemy forces with ruthless efficiency. Finally, Kash growled as he watched the battle unfold. "Let's show these soft creatures what real warriors can do." The Targoth fleet charged forward, their weapons unleashing a storm of destruction on the Draxians and Zorvans alike. The human fleet had already proven itself a formidable opponent, but the Targoth were built for one thing: war. And now they would bring the full force of their strength to bear. The galaxy, once divided into separate factions, was now locked in a deadly struggle. The Draxians, Zorvans, and Targoth had all been forced to confront the fact that humanity was not just a race of myth, it was a race of survivors. And survival was their only goal. As the battle escalated, the true nature of the human fleet began to emerge. They were not here to conquer. They were here to win for themselves, and for everyone. In the midst of the chaos, Drayden stood firm, his eyes watching as the battle unfolded. His fleet was holding its ground, but he knew that time was running out. The dying star's collapse was imminent. The clock was ticking, and no one, not even the humans, knew if they had enough time to stop it. "Push forward," Drayden ordered. "This battle won't last forever. But if we don't act now, none of us will survive the final reckoning." The battle was no longer just about territory. It was no longer about pride or dominance. It was about the future of the galaxy, and the human fleet was determined to secure it, no matter the cost. The battle that had erupted across the galaxy was now a raging storm. Energy blasts crackled in every direction, the soundless combat lighting up the vast empty space. The human fleet, once underestimated by every major faction, was now locked in a desperate struggle for survival. But the stakes had grown even higher. It was no longer just about who would control the galaxy. It was about whether anyone would survive the catastrophic chain reaction triggered by the dying star. The Zorvans, Draxians, and Targoth were all in motion. Each race had come to terms with the same bitter truth: humanity was not just a threat, they were the only ones who seemed to truly understand the gravity of the situation. The galaxy was on the brink of destruction, and the once divided factions had no choice but to face it together. But that realization came too late. The first signs of the dying star's instability had been subtle flickers in its light, tremors in the surrounding space, a soft hum that only the most sensitive sensors could detect. But now, the star was becoming increasingly erratic. Its core was collapsing, and it would soon trigger an explosion of unimaginable force, sending shockwaves across the galaxy. The result would be devastating, ripping through entire star systems and obliterating everything in its path. And no one knew how much time they had left. On the human flagship, Captain Drayden stood at the command center, staring at the readouts that tracked the star's unstable core. The timeline had shifted. What had once been a few days had now become a matter of hours. The star's collapse was accelerating, and the final countdown had begun. He could feel the weight of the decision he had to make. "We've given them every chance to act," Drayden muttered to himself, his voice low. "The galaxy could have united under our banner. They could have fought beside us. But now we'll have to do this alone." Lieutenant Cora stood beside him, her face etched with the same urgency that had overtaken the entire crew. "We can't wait any longer, Captain. We know what we have to do. If the galaxy isn't ready, we'll have to take control." The star isn't going to wait for them to figure it out. Drayden nodded. The time for diplomacy, for negotiation, had long passed. Now it was about one thing: survival. The human fleet had the capability to protect themselves from the stars. Collapse. They had spent years preparing for this moment, but they needed more. They needed to draw on all their power, all their resources, if they were going to have any chance of surviving the explosion. And that meant making an impossible choice, putting everything on the line. "Prepare the fleet," Drayden ordered, his voice resolute. "We have no choice. We'll initiate the stabilization protocol. We're going to anchor the star's core before it detonates. If we don't, everything is gone. And if they're not going to help us, we'll take matters into our own hands." Across the galaxy, the alien fleets were still engaged in battle. The Zorvans, Draxians, and Targoth had all sent their forces to the front lines, convinced that they could win the battle, that they could destroy humanity before they had a chance to secure their place in the galaxy. But now, in the midst of the chaos, the realization began to hit home. There was no time to fight. Lyra, the Zorvan commander, stood on the bridge of her ship, watching as the human fleet launched a series of strange, targeted energy blasts toward the dying star. Her heart raced. The human fleet wasn't attacking in the way they had expected. They were not aiming to destroy. They were trying to stabilize the star. What are they doing? Lyra muttered to herself, her brow furrowed. They're not trying to conquer us. They're trying to stop the star from collapsing. It was the moment of truth. The Zorvans had long prided themselves on their diplomacy and intellect, but now they had to face the reality that they had miscalculated. Humanity was not their enemy. The enemy was the star, the destruction it would bring to the galaxy. And if the humans succeeded in their mission, they could save everyone. "All ships cease fire," Lyra ordered suddenly, her voice filled with urgency. "We need to talk to the humans. They might be the only ones who can stop this." At the same time, on the Draxian flagship, Commander Orlan was grappling with his own thoughts. His fleet had been engaged with the human ships, but the fight had become meaningless. The star's collapse was accelerating, and the Draxians were beginning to realize that their primary objective, defeating humanity, was irrelevant. They had to work together if they were going to survive. But how could they trust the humans after all the bloodshed? "We need to halt the attack," Orlan said, his voice tense. "Our forces are spread too thin. We've lost too many ships already. If the humans are attempting something with the star, we need to get to them now." But the Targoth had a different approach. Kosh, their warlord, was furious. His people had always prided themselves on their strength, and they would not bow to the idea of working together with humanity. "No," Kosh growled, slamming his fist into the console in front of him. "We will not back down. This is our moment to strike, to prove our superiority. We've been waiting for this opportunity. The humans are weak. We will destroy them." But even Kosh's generals were starting to doubt. The rumblings of the star's collapse were now visible to everyone in the galaxy. It was no longer just a theory, it was a reality. The shockwaves had begun to ripple through the outer reaches of the star system, and every ship in the galaxy felt the tremors. The time for fighting each other was over. "Kosh, we cannot ignore this," one of his generals pleaded. "If we continue, we will all perish. The star is going to explode. It's not a fight we can win." Kosh looked around at his generals, his eyes filled with defiance. "We will fight to the end. But I will not see my people destroyed by a dying star." In the chaos, however, the galaxy's factions began to realize that their true enemy was not the human fleet or each other. It was the star. And if they wanted to survive, they would have to put aside their differences. Back on the human flagship, Drayden was staring at the console, the countdown ticking down in front of him. The core of the star was about to enter the final stages of collapse, and there was nothing they could do to stop it. The time had come to take drastic action. "Initiate," "Stabilization," Drayden said, his voice filled with cold determination. "We're going to anchor the core and reverse its collapse. It's our only chance." The human fleet moved into position, their ships surrounding the unstable star like a ring of fire. The humans activated their most advanced technology force. Fields and energy shields that began to pulse with light, stabilizing the core's energy fluctuations. The star began to slow its collapse, its massive waves of energy halting as the human fleet's technology took effect. But even as the humans worked to save the galaxy, the alien fleets watched from a distance, uncertain of what would happen next. They knew the star was being stabilized, but they did not know if it would hold. And with every passing second, the clock was ticking toward a reckoning they could no longer avoid. "Commander Orlan," Lyra called over the comms, her voice tight. "With urgency, we have to act together. The humans are stabilizing the star. If we don't help them, the whole system will collapse and we will all die. We can't afford to fight anymore." Orlan's response came after a long pause. "Agreed," he said grimly. "We need to unite. This is the final stand." As the fleets began to converge around the star, something remarkable began to happen. The once divided factions, the Zorvans, Draxians, Targoth, and humans, began to put aside their animosities. They realized that they all shared a common goal: survival. The human fleet was still working tirelessly to stabilize the star, and the alien fleets slowly began to assist, directing their energies toward the same goal. But the battle was not over yet. The star's collapse had only been slowed, it had not been completely stopped. The final reckoning was still upon them. The final stand was not a victory of war, it was a victory of unity. And now the galaxy would have to decide. Would they survive, or would they be torn apart by the forces they had once sought to control? The dust of battle had barely settled. The once fierce fighting between the factions, the Zorvans, the Draxians, the Targoth, and humanity had abruptly ceased when the realization hit everyone with stunning clarity. If they didn't act together, none of them would survive. The human fleet's efforts to stabilize the dying star had worked, but only for a short time. The core was still volatile, and the star's collapse had merely been slowed, not stopped. Time was running out. Captain Drayden stood at the front of the bridge on the flagship, his hands clasped behind his back, eyes staring at the holographic map of the galaxy. The human fleet, alongside the alien factions, had done everything they could to stabilize the star, but it was clear that without the proper tools or resources to fully repair it, they could only delay the inevitable. The clock was ticking. "It's not enough," Drayden muttered to himself, his mind racing. "We can't hold the collapse back forever." The question that now haunted every leader in the galaxy was, what would happen next? The once divided factions had put aside their differences and worked together, but their unity was fragile, born of necessity rather than true alliance. Could they really trust each other once the immediate danger was over? Could they continue to cooperate, or would their old grudges flare up again, leading to new wars? "We've done everything we could," Lieutenant Cora said quietly from her station, breaking Drayden's train of thought. "But if we don't do something soon, it will all be for nothing." Drayden turned to face her, his expression hardening. "I know, Cora. We've kept the star from collapsing for a little while longer, but we've reached the limits of our capabilities. Without more advanced technology, without more power, it's only a matter of time before the shockwave hits. The entire galaxy would be destroyed," Cora said, her voice strained with the weight of the truth. "Everything gone." The human fleet had done everything they could, but there was still no answer for the growing instability of the star. The efforts of the aliens coordinating their fleets, helping to contain the star's collapse, had been vital, but no one could deny the truth. The task ahead would require a level of power and unity far beyond what any one faction, or even all of them together, could provide dot in the middle of the vast galactic map, the star blinked erratically. Its instability had reached a tipping point. Time was slipping away, and the galaxy had no choice but to act. Drayden paced across the bridge, each step echoing in the hollow silence. He had known for years that humanity's return wasn't just about reclaiming their place. It was about survival. But this final moment, was something none of them could have predicted. Humanity, the galaxy's former rulers, had become the ones who carried the hope for the future of every life form in the galaxy. And now, the future of the galaxy rested on a choice. A choice that would define the course of history. Meanwhile, across the galaxy, the alien factions had gathered in their respective war rooms. The Zorvans, who had once prided themselves on their intellect and diplomacy, were now more uncertain than ever. Their fleet had been instrumental in stabilizing the star, but they knew it was only a matter of time before their efforts would falter. Lyra stood at the head of the Zorvan council table, her mind racing with 100 conflicting thoughts. "We can't keep fighting," she said, her voice calm yet tinged with a quiet urgency. "Our species, our people, we've done what we can. The humans are trying to save us. I believe it. We have to decide what kind of future we want." "Peace," replied one of the council members, his voice heavy with the weight of their choices. "We can't undo what's been done. We've fought the humans for so long, but now we have to trust them." "And trust the rest of the galaxy?" another council member asked, skepticism thick in his voice. "After everything that's happened, how can we be sure they'll keep their word?" Lyra closed her eyes for a moment, considering. "We don't have a choice. The star is dying. If we don't work together now, if we don't commit to this as a united galaxy, none of us will have a future." Across the galaxy, in the heart of the Draxian command, Commander Orlan stared out at the holographic displays, his expression set in grim determination. The Draxians had fought tooth and nail to maintain their dominance, but now, they faced an enemy far more formidable than any other species, the power of the dying star. And even their most advanced technology could only delay the inevitable. "We have two options," Orlan said, turning to his generals. "We can either fight for control of the galaxy, which will inevitably lead to our destruction, or we can unite with the humans and stabilize the star for good." The room fell silent. There was no easy answer. The Draxians were born warriors, their pride and honor tied to their ability to fight. But Orlan had seen enough to know that survival was more important than pride. "Trust them," Orlan said firmly, his voice steady. "We have no other choice." In the Targoth war room, Kash's mind was still clouded by his rage. He had always believed that strength, pure, unyielding strength, was the answer. The Targoth had thrived on combat and war, on the belief that the strongest should rule. But now, faced with the reality of the star's collapse, Kash was beginning to understand something he had never fully grasped before. Sometimes, true strength came in the form of unity. "We should continue the fight," Kash growled, slamming his fist on the table. "The humans are trying to dominate us." But one of his generals spoke up, her voice calm but unyielding. "Warlord Kash, we've fought for centuries. And where has it gotten us? The star is dying. Our people are at risk. The time for fighting each other is over." The words seemed to cut through Kash's fury like a blade. He felt a strange unease twist in his gut. For the first time in his life, he was unsure. But even in the face of uncertainty, he understood one thing: survival came first. And to survive, they would have to work with the humans. "Prepare the fleet," Kasha said reluctantly, his voice tight. "We'll stand with the humans for now." Back on the human flagship, Drayden was looking over the final readings. The star was becoming more unstable by the second, and the shockwaves were already tearing through nearby star systems. There was no time left. The galaxy was on the edge of annihilation. "All fleets, prepare to engage," Drayden ordered, his voice ringing out across the command deck. This is our last chance. The human fleet moved into position around the unstable star. The alien fleets, the Zorvans, Draxians, and Targoth, joined them, their ships forming a protective barrier on the star. It was no longer just about fighting, it was about holding the galaxy together long enough to make a difference. "We have no choice," Drayden said quietly, looking over at Cora. "If we don't succeed now, nothing will matter. We'll be forgotten." As the fleets initiated their final sequence, the human and alien ships worked together in perfect synchronization. The technology the humans had developed to stabilize the star began to pulse, emitting a wave of energy that surrounded the dying star like a protective cocoon. But the pressure on their shields was immense. The forces at play were so great that the shields flickered with each passing second, and the energy required to hold the star's core in place was almost beyond their capabilities. "Hold steady," Drayden said through gritted teeth. "We're almost there." Seconds turned into minutes as the ships around the star concentrated all their power into the stabilizing fields. But then, a sudden flare of energy from the star's core lit up the battlefield like a supernova. The shockwave that followed threatened to tear apart the entire system, but the fleets held strong. The human and alien ships absorbed the impact, their shields shuddering under the immense force. And then, suddenly, there was silence. The star had stabilized. For a moment, it was as if the galaxy had collectively held its breath. The systems surrounding the star, once on the brink of collapse, were now safe. The threat of total destruction had been averted, at least for now, but the war was not over. The galaxy had been saved, but the path ahead would not be easy. Trust had been earned, but it was fragile. The factions that had once fought against each other now stood together, united by a common cause. And while survival had been achieved, the cost was high. Drayden watched as the alien fleets pulled away from the star, their ships slowly retreating back to their respective territories. The galaxy had survived, but at what cost? Could they maintain the fragile peace, or would the wounds of the past tear them apart again? "We've won," Drayden said quietly, "but the real challenge starts now."